Go through the different items that you had selected last week. So this way you don't have to go through, I don't know, I think it was like almost like close to an hour worth of tutorial. All right. The first thing that was selected, the forced justification and issues that arise from that. So you have, let me pull up my character. All right. So obviously you have your left, you have your center, you have your right. Then you have your justify. So you have this left justify. So anything that goes to the end will be sitting right here. Okay. And you can see that you want to have everything kind of be pushed on the outside, right? So like this, so that um, that optical margin, let me pull that out. Where is right here? All right. So you can see, let me turn, well, by keeping them on, you can see all of these little bump outs, right? So it's a nice flush line right here, but then as you go up, you can see a little tiny bit that jumps out. If you turn it off, they push within. So then as you're reading, you can see the eye comes down and it kind of jets in, all right? So anytime that you use justified type, you really want to have your optical margin sitting there. This option, when you're working within Illustrator, it's called hanging punctuation. So it's essentially the same thing. It's pushing any kind of characters on the outside of what the text line is, just to kind of keep it a little bit cleaner for the eye to match up the lines going down the column of text. All right. Now, generally speaking, you want to turn off hyphenation, right? So make sure everything is, turn off a hyphenate. But sometimes when you do justified type, you end up having awkward spacing, right? And you can see like the gaps in this first line is so much wider than throughout the rest of the paragraph. And that's really, you want to avoid that. That it becomes problematic and it becomes something that stands out to the reader. Your job when you're laying out type is to make it invisible. Just so this way the eye glides across the word structure, the sentence structure, and it's just like a very easy, clean read. So there are times that you probably do want to have it hyphenated. So this way you can see by hyphenating, it pulls up these 5 characters up into that line. You can see it's a much cleaner spacing as you go through the lines of text. All right. If you don't, the other thing that I would highly recommend if you do end up going this route is you don't have thin columns. You really do kind of go to that maximum. This is insane. So what's happening with these? So like I had shown before, you can do, if you do a hard return, it will go right into another bullet point. But if you hold shift and return, it will keep it as a soft return. But by doing that, if you have justified type, you will end up having this happen. All right, so it's something that you actually cannot do if this is what you're going to be doing. Now you can see even with a wider column, look how awful this paragraph is, right? So there are times that, like I said, you do want to hit hyphenate, and then there are times, no matter what you do, it will not work. And it's unfortunate. You have to go in, you have to like kind of make individual changes. You have to go in and say, all right, you know what? If I'm able to adjust my tracking and leading, could I kind of start tweaking things to kind of get everything to fit in there, right? So you would hit this, you try and get that up there, you would try and get this up there. So you end up trying to force returns because InDesign is doing a terrible job for you. All right. All right, so that is rivers that you want to avoid. Typically only ever seen with this. All right. All right, what else did you have checked? You had bringing in the photo and seeing the information. Let me grab. All right, So this is selected. Let's bring this in. Oops. All right. All right, so anytime you bring something in, it will show you a bunch of information for that link. All right, so this here will tell you what it is. I completely broke my own rule when I was quickly bringing stuff in, but you never want to bring a JPEG in. You never, ever want an RGB, especially if it's going to be printed. And then you can see the effective, you know what? Let me bring in the proper image that I used for the tutorial. Okay. All right, so you have your TIFF, you have your CMYK, and then you can see the actual resolution and then the effective resolution. This is the most important thing right here, right? So it doesn't matter that you end up having this a much higher res image. You want to make sure you stay under 300. So this way you know that it will print perfectly, right? Anything under 300, you gamble to have the image become pixelated. Okay, so if you bring an image in, you think it's large enough, but yet you cannot get this effective DPI to be 300, then you need to find a different image. All right. So that's how you bring in and look at the link information. Every photo you bring in will be listed here, and then you just click on it, and then all this information will pull up. Okay, so that is how you check the images. All right, what else was this? Oh, the optical alignment issues. All right, so let me do. All right. So just as this is important to have your optical alignment selected, what that is for copy text, right? When you go up into header text, you really don't want this selected. So what's going to happen is any glyph that shoots out is going to kind of shoot out because you want to try and keep this nice, clean, straight line. You do not want that with header text. The W is not doing it. Yes, and all right. So here, this is probably the extreme. You can see how awful that Y looks when it shoots all the way out. All right, this is not what you want here. So whenever you have this kind of thing happening, turning it off will keep everything much cleaner when you have much larger text that you're dealing with for the title. All right, so that's these kind of letters, the A, the Y, the V, the W, those are the ones, especially when it's lined up with a very vertical stem from a glyph. All right, so that's when you would want to turn off your optical alignment. All right, the tabs in creating leaders. All right, so let me just delete this so I can start fresh for you. So you have typically, let's say that you're doing something for a table of content, or it's going to be a menu, all right? And you have like different prices, and you have that list going down. Oops. Third. All right, so what you want to do, you want to end up having these items kind of like sit within a column. And let's say this is the column that you have going on. You'll see that, items will have like a period going in between all the different items. So this way it's easier for the person that's looking at this to quickly see the item and then the price, and then go to the next item and see the price, right? You never, ever, ever want to just hit a period a bunch of times and get that all the way over here. Because again, what happens if you decide I really want to make it less? Then you're really going to sit there and delete a couple of these periods until everything sits there. That would be insane. You want to like make your document so this way everything is movable as you're coming up with different ideas of how the spread is going to look. All right. So what you do is you have your cursor sitting right before the second item, and you hit Shift Tab. And then what happens is it will push that next item all the way to the right. So you can see the nines are flush, and it doesn't matter how wide or narrow that this column gets, it stays all the way to the right. Okay? Now you want to add in the periods in the middle. So you pull up your tabs. You can hit this, and then you select the items. You drop in your first little tab here, and then you can hit in the leader like so. All right. And again, it could be any item, any character that you would want. If we want to have a star, then a dash, right? So whatever you put up in here is going to be repeated. And then if you end up making changes to the width, it just removes whatever the excess is or adds more, right? So this is how you would add, that spacing in between to make it a little bit easier to make that connection. All right, so that is your tabs and your leaders. Outlining text to drop an image in. Is this still, no, this is still text. All right, so I'm going to grab this instead. All right, so we have, actually, all right. So just like in Illustrator, when you have your text selected, Command-Shift-O, and it will make it into an outline. And then once you have that sized up, you can then drag in and you drop directly. You can see how it's just got like the little icon, but when you move over the actual text, the icon changes. That tells me that I'm dropping it within that text box. All right, so now that text essentially becomes a mask for that image sitting inside that you can then adjust. All right, so that's how you bring in an image and drop it into the outline. All right, next was creating styles. So to create styles, you go to your character styles. I have these already set up from the previous. Okay, so you can only add styles after you've gone through the process of actually setting up a design. You can't just blindly say, all right, I need to have a title, I need to have a subheader, I need to have copy text. You have to actually figure out what the typeface you're going to be using, because what happens is all of those choices that you make is going to be sucked into the actual style option. So you select all the text for your style, you hit plus, and it will come up character style 1. This here, you can double click it and change it. Definitely name it something that is going to make sense for you later on. All right. So header text. If you click on basic character format, you'll see what the family is, the style, the size, the leading, the tracking. Anything that you changed from default will be right here. All right. Anything that has not been changed remains grayed out. Okay. So that's why it's important to figure out what your design is going to be before you start adding in your styles. Then you add another style. Okay. And then here, add another style. And here you'll see this was left as Roman. Nothing's there, right? Because if you don't change the weight from regular to something else, to light or bold, it will stay grayed out. The leading hasn't changed, only the type size. Default width in design is 12 points. So the fact that I changed it down to 11, that's why it was triggered. All right. So then once you have all of these, if as you're working and you have different text boxes and you say, this I really want to be a header text, then you can come up in here and say you decide, what, I really want this to be like a darker green. You can click on this, go to, where's my advanced colors? Right, so then you can make those changes here. If you decide I don't want bold anymore, I want it to be medium. You can see it changes it all together. So that's essentially what styles are. It's the same thing as the reason why we create swatches. So this way, when we print and we want to make changes, we can make the changes across all the file, not just individually. All right. Effects. So I think this has one already. I think I brought in this, and let's make this a little bigger. All right, so when you click up here, you have this effects. If you don't have this shown, you can right click on the text and you go to actual effects. So I'm going to turn off drop shadow for a second. And then I want to, so you have your text sitting here. I want to blend this into the clouds, right? So I can come up here, I go to transparency. By default, the mode is going to be normal. So if I do screen or if I do overlay, you can see how that changes how the text blends in with that background image. All right. The other thing was, so that's the transparency changing. And then obviously you can change in your transparency itself. All right. Now the other part with the drop shadows and everything else, if you click on the same thing, but then you have these options here. So if you want drop shadow, you can see the drop shadow drops down. You can change the color of the shadowing. You control the distance of everything, the blur of it, the size of the shadow, glow, and everything else that you have, that, you know, different options to allow that text to kind of stand off away from the background. All right. Right, so that is your effects, that is your blending options and transparency. The last thing that you had selected was gradients. So with that, it is very similar to the Illustrator. So you have your swatches sitting here, then you have your, let me bring my tools in here, and then my gradient sitting here. All right, so you have this selected, and then there's all these little paint buckets that you can move around and adjust where it actually blends between one color to the next. When you want to add another color, you just drag and drop another color in there. When you want to remove a color, you drag down. All right. So then you have different ways of blending this. You have different options, whether you want to have linear or radial. Then to control how this, what direction this goes, you can click on this gradient tool. And as you click and drag, that is what controls where the gradient goes. All right. All right. That is it that you had selected. So hopefully this helps you. I hope you had a great time this week, and you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.